Now,
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Wow. This week has just flown by. I mean, I'm amazed here. I cannot believe that it is Friday. Well, first of all, I also can't believe that it's only 5:07 in the morning on News Talk 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news. A good Friday morning to one and all. I'm sitting here with her smiling face, just makes it all worthwhile. Her name is Patrice Onwuka. Good morning, Patrice.
Good morning, Andrew. Happy Friday.
Thank you. I will wait all week for that. Happy Friday to you as well. This is O'Connor and Company, of course. I'm Andrew Langer, in for Larry O'Connor today. Larry will be back on Monday, everybody. And we got a jam-packed Friday show. We really do have a jam-packed Friday show. We're going to be talking with Jason Johnson. He's the president of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. He's an attorney and former police executive. We got Mary Catherine Ham. Oh, I love talking to MK. She's the Outkick columnist, Fox News contributor, former WMAL morning show co-host. She's a board member of the Travis Manion Foundation. We've got Hans von Spakovsky, the manager of the Election Law Reform Initiative at the Heritage Foundation, a former FEC commissioner, and he served on the Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections. We're going to talk to him about the latest from down in Georgia, as well as election integrity. Bram Weinstein is joining us. He's the play-by-play announcer for the Washington Commanders and 6:30 ESPN host about this weekend's game. Gregory Pemberton, head of the D.C. Police Union, is going to join us. And Brett Baer is going to join us later on today. So, as I said, lots going on here. So, I will say this. I will admit something to all of you. I had a moment. I don't know if it was a fever dream. I don't know if it was hallucination from needing to get to sleep. But I swear to God, when I went to bed last night, there was a story that had appeared in my newsfeed saying that Trump was thinking about this third debate. He said that there's no debate. But actually, before we get to this, Patrice, because we haven't talked.
Yeah. Oh,
your impressions. I said this to Mercy yesterday. I'll repeat the joke. I know you don't do impressions, but what were your impressions of Tuesday's debate?
I think Tuesday's debate was interesting to watch. I think the best performers were the two ABC hosts, David Muir and his colleague, who did their very best to cosplay journalists.
Playing the role of unbiased journalists, or yes,
exactly.
David Muir, and yes, that's
to cosplay some type of unbiased, journalism. I loved how they jumped in with so many fact checks for President Trump and zero fact checks for Kamala Harris. I mean, they might as well have been wearing her babes for Kamala or babes for Harris pins, booty shorts.
They might have been Joe Biden. They might have been Joe Biden wearing a Donald Trump 2024 hat, or wearing a Kamala, the opposite of Joe Biden wearing a Kamala Harris 2024 hat.
Exactly. That said, I think it was interesting. I would have loved to have seen President Trump press her more. I think what I liked about President Trump was he was very restrained. He didn't get into a lot of the name calling that people often don't like that he does sometimes. And so he was restrained, and I think he held himself back in that way. That said, a lot of people thought that he absolutely, not the media pundits, but regular folks loved his performance, loved what he did, and think he won. And the fact that he's reaping the benefits from the debate speaks volumes. So you know what? Hey, he doesn't need to do anything else at this point, but just campaign.
This has been a real lesson for me in the last couple of days, and it's funny. This week and the debate and the post-debate has really, I think, underscored, it's so funny. I have a friend of mine who used to needle me for being too much within the D.C. bubble. I've never considered myself to be someone who is, very much in the D.C. bubble. I live outside of the Beltway, well outside the Beltway. I've lived outside the Beltway for a very long time, but I do work in D.C., and the reaction of regular everyday people to Donald Trump's performance, the disconnect between what I wanted, right? I'm someone, and I don't know about you and how you came to get involved in politics and policy. We should talk about that at some point. But for me, I've always wanted to be inspired. I want my leaders to inspire me. Now, I want them to inspire me with their rhetoric, but I also want there to be some kind of substance behind that rhetoric. And so, for me, Trump's debate performance was disappointing when viewed within that. But then the last 2 days, I'm on the air, and I'm hearing from folks who are like, no, I loved the debate performance, and Trump pushed back. And all of a sudden, we're looking at, the Reuters story 2 days ago, 6 in 10 of the so-called undecided voters saying that they're going to vote for Trump, in their panel, and Trump getting a bump elsewhere, on the economy.
Yes.
I mean, you grew up well outside the Beltway.
But I grew up in No, you're not.
No.
I grew up in the liberal bubble in Boston.
Right.
I moved down to D.C. And I work in policy in this region. So it is very easy to think, well, he needs to be more like a traditional candidate. He needs to speak like a traditional candidate, and that's not who President Trump is, and that's not why people love him. One, but also are considering him two, because they don't want the perfect answers. They
Right.
want to know that somebody is fighting for them and somebody sees them, and they don't get that in Harris. They get the elitism, which is
Exactly.
hilarious to me, because she's painting herself as a middle class gal, but she's really the elite. I tell you, you bow to my knee and my dictates, whereas they're drawn to President Trump, who a wealthy guy, successful guy, which is great, but he gets the regular man, and he has not forgotten the regular man and woman.
That is a brilliant bit of insight there. That's exactly it. You hit the nail on the head. As much as she was also restrained in a way. I mean, she was doing the faces and all that jazz. As much as she gave these well-rehearsed perfect answers, it was those well-rehearsed perfect answers that may have been her undoing in all of this.
I agree.
Because you're right. She came across as inauthentic. She came across as acting, as staged, and that's the real issue. And so we got this. We're going to get into this issue of the third debate as well with Kamala, what she's talking about. But let's hear what I guess this is Vince yesterday talking about this. Michael, go ahead and play cut number 1.
What would need to change for you to agree to a second debate? Would you want different rules? Would you want a different format?
Well, when you don't win, it's like a fighter. When a fighter has a bad fight, gets knocked out, or loses the fight, the first thing he says is, we want a rematch. So we won the debate according to every poll, every single poll. I think that, are we going to do a rematch? I just don't know. But we'll think about it.
Would you still do the one on NBC on September 25th? You proposed that. Are you still committed to that?
I would do NBC. I'd do Fox too. But right now we have to determine whether or not we even want to do it. We had a great night last night.
So, okay, that's interesting. Well, it was a great night last night, so that was not from yesterday. So that clip is from before this announcement came back. Listen, when we come back, we're going to talk about whether or not Trump should do another debate. Because I'll listen. I'm not going to tell you yet. I will let you know what I think in a moment. But first, a.m.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live.
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
So Trump was talking about this, Patrice. He said maybe, just maybe not. Caroline Leavitt yesterday puts out that there will be no third debate. Former President Trump declared Thursday there will be no third debate with Kamala Harris half an hour after an internal campaign poll showed his Democratic opponent got no polling bounce in key states, while Trump got a 2-point bump from their verbal sparring match. I mean, that is fascinating to me. Again, it shows my disconnect here.
Your liberal bubble is showing. What's interesting, yesterday we saw that on TikTok, President Trump's closing speech garnered 17.6 million views. Now, I think maybe part of it is that there was no opening speech, as you traditionally expect to hear from both candidates. And so people, if you stayed up late enough to catch the closing of each one, then you probably really hinged on what they said. And maybe that's why President Trump's closing speech went viral, and people are saying, okay, I didn't watch the whole thing. What's the takeaway? They saw that and like, okay, he's got my vote. So I don't blame President Trump and his campaign for saying, we don't need it. We won. We really don't need to do another debate.
I get it. This is what it comes back to for me. I don't necessarily agree with him that, if you lose a prize fight, that's when you call for a rematch. Maybe, just maybe. But on the other hand, I think that if you got a 2-point bump out of this with that debate performance, what's to say that you wouldn't get the maybe that's too much of a political gamble. I say get her on stage again. Get her talking for another 45 minutes about this. I had this conversation with Ed Henry the other day. This issue of the longer Kamala Harris talks, the more people don't like it, the more nutty things she says. Speaking of which, here's Kamala Harris at a rally yesterday. Michael, let's go ahead and play cut number 2.
2 nights ago, Donald Trump and I had our first debate. And I believe we owe it to the voters to have another debate.
Do we? Do we owe it to the voters to have another? I'm not so sure. Right? I think you owe it to me. I'm a voter. I suppose you owe it to me to have a third. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Patrice.
What she owes the voters is an explanation for why, for 3.5 years, she lied about her boss's mental capacity, the fact that he was sliding into mental decline. She owes the voters a reason for why she was literally anointed and installed at the top of the ticket, rather than actually facing any sort of challenge in a democratic, small d democratic contest to be added to the. She owes the voters the answer to why she should be the nominee when 0 voters cast their ballot for her to be on the ballot. Those are the questions she owes. She owes voters the reason for why she was the last person in the room during the decision to leave Afghanistan and the fallout from that, and why she has yet to put the names of the 13 fallen U.S. servicemen and women on her lips and at least acknowledge what happened on that day. She owes a lot of things to the voters. It is not another debate.
Well, let's also get into this, which is there's going to be a vice presidential debate. And again,
that's true. As
someone who is, with my inside the beltway, my establishmentarian perspective, Patrice,
yes.
I am itching to see J.D. Vance on the dais facing up, squaring up against Tim Walz. I am waiting for this because I think this is going to be epic to watch the two of them go mano a mano, as it were. He is. I could listen to J.D. Vance, all day, 6 days a week, twice. Boy, that sounds really weird. But I love listening to J.D. Vance. Is
that a man crush? I detect.
So I'm not going to go as far as to say a man crush, but J.D. Vance appeals to those issues where I want an articulate, inspiring leader who can articulate a message and go after and prosecute a case like this. And to go up against Kim Jong-Walz, as my buddy John Justice calls him, I cannot wait for that. Listen, we've got so much more to get to. It is 5:21 a.m. Well, there you go. As I'm asking if they're going to be a C segment, we're doing a C segment. Hi, everybody. I'm Andrew Langer, in for Larry O'Connor, alongside Patrice Onwuka. Hello, Patrice. How are you doing?
Hey, Andrew. Good.
So,
it's a Friday.
So were you in a Greek sorority when you were in college? I was not.
I was not. No,
Yeah.
I was never cool enough. And I'm kind of grateful now because they kind of seem a little culty sometimes. I'm probably going to get some backlash on that.
Oh, you may get some backlash on that. But both of my daughters are in sororities. My wife was in a sorority at their various colleges. Listen, different colleges have different sorority cultures. But apparently both Lindsay Davis and Kamala Harris were both member of Alpha Kappa Alpha, which is the AKAs. AKA, yes.
Pink and green. I know them well.
Yes,
They're everywhere.
The AKAs and the DSTs, the Delta Sigma Thetas, right? The two predominant African-American women sororities. And they weren't at the same college, obviously, but part of the same chapter. Nevertheless, there is this sisterhood that's supposed to transcend the colleges. Now, listen, I don't know. Here's what I know. I know overall, right? Because it also doesn't explain, Davis's behavior, right? It's not as though he was a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha. I will come back to this. to me, the discussions of whether or not Kamala Harris got the questions in advance are they're unimportant questions. I mean, they're important just in terms of ethics overall, but none of the questions that she got were so outrageous that anybody else, would have needed to over prepare for them. On the issue of whether or not they fact checked Donald Trump more than they fact check her, well, that's obvious. Of course they did, but whether or not that has anything to do with their sorority connection is a whole nother thing. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, as much as they, have a sisterhood, maybe they locked eyes for a moment and did their AKA sign. I don't know. I don't think she received the questions in advance. It's similar to the earpiece thing that people are saying her earrings were. I just think that the questions were very basic and should have been expected. And frankly, we should really focus on her answers, which were non-answers. I mean, the fact that Jake Tapper called her out for the first question, the response to the first question, she dodged it and went in a totally different direction. So, whether, and obviously her answers were very canned and prepared. That doesn't mean that she got the questions. It just means that she memorized whatever answer she wanted to give to whatever question was going to be thrown out there. And that, to me, does not speak well of somebody who's able to speak off the cuff or be able to deliver in a moment with no preparation.
And we're going to come back to this. There's this story out there. Former Clinton advisor is demanding ABC investigate a potential rigging of the debate. Plus, a D.C. police officer got sentenced. Later on in the show, we're going to be talking with Jason Johnson from the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund about this, as well as the head of the D.C. Police Union, Gregory Pemberton. It's 5:30 a.m. on WMAL.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.
Now
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Well, good morning, everybody. It is 5:37 on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. We are making sense of the news. A good Friday morning to one and all. Patrice, always good to talk to you. Happy Friday to you. I can say now because you said it to me.
Yes, absolutely. To you too, Andrew, and everybody listening.
Yes, happy Friday, everybody. You're listening to O'Connor and Company. I am Andrew Langer, in for Larry today. Larry will be back on Monday. That is, of course, Patrice Onwuka. Always glad to sit down with her. Got an amazing show today. We're going to be joined later on. Mary Catherine Ham is going to talk to us about what's going on in the world. Hans von Spakovsky about elections law, what's going on in Georgia. Brom Weinstein is going to help us premiere the Commanders game this weekend. Gregory Pemberton going to be joining us. He's head of the D.C. Police Union, and we're going to talk about what he's going to want to talk about with us as well. Brett Baer from Fox News. But we're, of course, in a little bit, we're going to be joined by Jason Johnson to talk about what I think is just a tragic story here. D.C. police officer sentenced yesterday in the fatal Karen Hilton Brown chase case. This is just some of this gets into the cover-up versus the crime here.
Okay.
But two officers, Dale Sutton and Andrew Zabavsky. Sutton was convicted by a jury in December 2022 of second-degree murder for chasing 20-year-old Karen Hilton Brown through the Brightwood Park neighborhood after an attempted traffic stop. The chase ended with Hilton Brown driving his moped out of an alley and onto Kennedy Street, where he was struck and killed by an oncoming vehicle. I mean, this is...
So the assailant was running from police and died when he got struck by a different car.
Right, and the police officer was found guilty for... So let's go ahead and play cut number 4 there, Michael.
The streets demanding justice. In the fall of 2020, Black Lives Matter activists took to the streets demanding justice for Karan, often violently confronting and even assaulting police. But these protesters had been grossly misinformed. Many believed Officer Sutton had struck Karan with his car. He didn't. Or that he had been involved in a high-speed chase through the streets of D.C. He wasn't. And these furious protesters thought the pursuit was just because Karan was riding on the sidewalk without a helmet. It wasn't. Sutton, a 13-year police veteran, didn't strike, shoot, harm, or even touch Karan Hilton Brown. Sutton was part of a low-speed pursuit averaging about 20 miles per hour that only lasted about 3 minutes. And why were Sutton and other officers trying to apprehend Karan that night? Karan was a known gang member, a member of the Kennedy Street crew, and Officer Sutton was part of an elite police unit who specifically target gang crime in the most dangerous parts of the city, the CST. We'll talk more about them in a bit. Karan Hilton Brown died after exiting a blind alley on a motorized scooter without a helmet and colliding with a passing car. Sutton was over 40 feet away at the time. So how did this officer get charged and convicted for murder for this? Well, in recent years, activist prosecutors have been throwing ridiculous charges at cops to appease anti-cop activists in cities across the country. And most of these wrongfully charged officers get acquitted as soon as a jury looks at the facts and realizes the cop is innocent.
This is crazy. I mean, we are literally living in the twilight zone. If a suspect goes off, he gets into evades capture on a moped, goes through an alley to try to get away, and then gets somehow killed, and the cop is held liable for this, criminally liable for this. I mean, that is, and so one of the things we're going to be talking about down the road is this issue of how this is impacting police officers, both this case specifically and then generally, whether or not, how they want to, why would you become a police officer in Washington, D.C. if this is going to happen? Yeah,
absolutely. Well, to your point, the D.C. Police Union put out a statement here. Let me read a little bit of it.
Please.
The D.C. Police Union is deeply disheartened and troubled by the recent conviction and sentencing of Officer Sutton, a dedicated law enforcement professional who has served the community with integrity and commitment. It's a grave miscarriage of justice. The prosecution's approach was tainted by the anti-police rhetoric that surged in 2020, which has increasingly influenced legal proceedings and public opinions against officers. Our union stands with Officer Sutton. This is what the D.C. Police Union says, and we call on the community, media, and legal system to recognize the inherent challenges faced by officers in the line of duty and to resist allowing political sentiments to overshadow the pursuit of true justice. The brave men and women who serve our community deserve to be judged by the facts, not by the shifting tides of public opinion. That's a powerful statement, Andrew, and I think it speaks to what police are up against. They're not just fighting the bad guys, they're fighting the so-called good guys who should instead of prosecuting the bad guys, are prosecuting the actual good guys in this case.
And we're going to be joined in the 6 a.m. hour by Jason Johnson, president of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, an attorney and former police executive. We're also going to be hearing from Gregory Pemberton in the 8 a.m. hour, head of the D.C. Police Union, to talk about this. Oh, and by the way, Patrice,
yes,
I got my federal court jury summons in the mail 2 days ago.
Andrew,
I've been summoned.
Oh, wow.
But it's one of these things where it's interfering with the other radio work that I'm doing, but
yes.
I want to go. I don't want to not do jury duty for this very reason. I want to try to serve on a jury for this, which of course will completely make me ineligible for the journey. We've got so much more to get to. It's 5:43 on WMAL. So we're going to be joined in a bit by Hans von Spakovsky from the Heritage Foundation, an election law expert, an election integrity expert.
Oh, I can't wait.
We go down this road, and we got more news, out of the Georgia court system. As I mentioned, once again, I don't want to avoid my federal jury duty summons there, Patrice. Even though they want me the last 2 weeks of October, which is
what if you land on a whopper of a case? I mean, talk about amazing, right?
That would be fine. It's just I want it to happen after the election. I got too much going on between now and election day. After the election is fine. They got me. But anyway, so more news out of this. Scott McPhee, the Fulton County judge in charge of this case, threw out two more of the charges against him. Now, he doubled down on the other remaining charges here, but he said that at least two of these charges are not within the scope of the state's election law orbit, that they are five. So the ruling means that 5 of the original 13 criminal counts against Trump in the indictment obtained last year have now been tossed. McAfee in March dismissed 6 other counts, including 3 against Trump, and that's where they are. And so it's a situation in which we could listen. Trump is eventually right. It's either on appeal or in the court itself. These things are going to get overturned, and yet he's still having to deal with this stuff. I'm sorry, Patrice, go right ahead.
Oh, this is just the lawfare falling apart. Fannie
Right.
Willis's case falling apart. Meanwhile, her daughter is facing some different charges
my
of
God.
her own, and their family drama is a whole other salacious piece of this. But the larger issue, which is so interesting, is that lawfare was weaponized against President Trump, so that the narrative going into 2024 is that he's facing nearly 100 charges, which have now a substantial number have been cut back. So you don't even hear the left and the prosecutor that he's going up against even really bringing those charges, because the charges have actually energized voters behind President Trump. People recognize the political nature of all of these charges, and people recognize that these are not going to hold up. He's in fact they're going to be overturned at some point in the future. So, there goes a lesson about weaponizing the law against regular people who have done nothing wrong.
Right.
Unfortunately, this happens every day, not just to President Trump. This happens to a lot of regular law-abiding citizens.
And this is why I think that yet another sort of fatal mistake that Kamala Harris has made and made during the debate in trying to make this an issue. Because what they are finding is that you have a certain portion of the electorate that looks at Trump and looks at the lawfare against Trump as as an attack on all things conservative.
Yes.
But then there's a substantial portion of the African American community that looks at this guy and says, I've been here. I've seen this happen to people I know. I've seen, it's really funny because, we talk about the issues of criminal justice reform, and my colleague David Safavian's doing great work on that with CPAC, and Frank Russo as well at CPAC. But the folks at Heritage, it's so funny. Because long before we were talking about Heritage and Project 2025, Heritage was leading the way on this issue of overcriminalization and the idea that a prosecutor who wants you for one thing will stack on a bunch of other charges to make your crimes appear that much worse. By the way, I just sort of have to look askance at the folks who were so-called allies of Donald Trump, who took plea agreements in these Georgia cases as a way of the supposedly best legal minds on Donald Trump's team, some of which he did pick, and cannot escape that criticism. But nevertheless, the folks who sort of went down this road,
they thought it was going to be easier.
Yes, this overcriminalization issue is a huge one, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is. Yep. I mean, there are just the regulatory crimes, but then there are prosecutors who will know that there are false charges being lobbed against regular innocent people, and they will go through with it. I've seen it up close before. And it's interesting, Kamala Harris, there's that great clip of her saying, I've learned the power of the pen. You see this little thing here? With this pen, I can destroy someone's life based on the charges that I make. And I think that is what a lot of these prosecutors do. They hold people's life in the balance, and they take joy in holding people's life in the balance. But the people's lives in the balance they're holding are not the people who are actually committing the crimes. It's regular people who are law-abiding, but they don't like them for whatever political or whatever reason it is, and it's disgusting.
I know we're up on a break. One of my favorite examples of this was someone who was being charged with violating a federal law called the Lacey Act. He was a seafood importer, and some whistleblower had called and said that he was illegally importing, I think it was lobster tails. Now, set that aside for a second, but the point is, they raided his boat. 7% of his catch, so 93% of it was the right size. 7% of it may have been undersized, and they were charging him. But one of the things they charged him with was he had packed, when he demanded this seafood, I think it was in Central America, be packed in clear plastic bags. The federal rules said that it had to be packed in cardboard. But because he packed it in clear plastic bags, that was a violation of federal law. Because it was an illegal product then, as a result of him packing them in clear plastic bags, he was charged with smuggling. Because he paid for it, with his own money. It was charged with the money laundering or wire fraud. Anyway, we're up on a break here at 7:54 here on WMAL.